Hello, hello, everyone. Welcome to our 2022 Buyer Insights and Intelligence series. This session is titled 4 Strategies to Listen and Act on Buyer Signals. I'm Claudia Tarico, editor of Demand Gen Report, and I will be your moderator for this presentation. So thank you so much for joining us today. Before we begin, I'm going to run through a few housekeeping slides, and then we will kick things off. First things first, if you're new to Demand Gen Report, welcome. We are an online media company and we publish everything for B2B marketing and sales professionals. We've got daily news, we've got a weekly email newsletter, special reports, benchmark research, and a rich menu of additional resources. So please, if you haven't done so already, join more than 75,000 subscribers to our weekly newsletter by subscribing to demandgenreport.com today. And then, of course, during and after, at any time, really, follow along and share your thoughts, feedback with us on Twitter and LinkedIn, or just, come on down and say hi. You could use the hashtag specifically for this webinar series. It's hashtag BII22. All of our links and handles are right here on your screen, and we look forward to connecting with you on social media. All right, I'm also super excited to announce that we are going back to Boston for our B2B sales and marketing exchange. It's going to be the second year since COVID that we're bringing it back to in-person. We got back to in-person last year, so we're so excited to get to the encore again this year for more B2B marketing and sales insights from leading practitioners, analysts, authors, you name it. It's going to be an awesome agenda, so you definitely don't want to miss it. For more information, visit the B2B SMX website. It's b2bsalesmarketing.exchange. So I really hope to see you all there in Boston this August. All right, and for this presentation, we will be using the On24 platform. So during the session, you'll be able to really access everything you need on this toolbar that we have mapped out on the slide right here. So first and foremost, we encourage you to ask our presenter questions today. To do so, click that Q&A widget at the top right corner of the screen. The session will run about 25 to 30 minutes, if not more. Then we'll have some time for Q&A following the session, so submit those questions at any time. And then if you want to see what else we have in store for the series this year, access all the BII sessions on the right of your screen under the Q&A widget. And then even below that, we have some additional resources that we've made available to you. Today's session will, of course, be recorded, and all attendees will receive an archive link to the presentation to go back and share and review. And then in addition to joining the conversation online and submitting the questions, please just let us know how we're doing. So we put together a very brief survey that will automatically launch when the session ends. So if you could just stick around, answer a few questions for us, we would really appreciate it. If you can't stick around to the end, that's okay. You could even pull up, complete, and submit the survey at any time during the session by clicking on the survey icon at the bottom of your screen. We have it circled here on the slide. So please, before signing off today, please take a moment to complete this quick questionnaire. All right, now, without further ado, I'm so excited to introduce you all to Cheri Hulse of On24, who will be our speaker and presenter today. Cheri is a VP of Strategy and Research at On24 and leads the Center of Marketing Transformation. She is a recognized thought leader in the field of marketing, in-person, hybrid, and digital events and marketing technology. Previously, she was a principal analyst at Forrester and SiriusDecisions, covering all things physical and digital events, MarTech, B2B marketing strategy, and agencies. So I'm so excited to be presenting with Cheri again today for this session. Without further ado, I'm going to stop talking and pass things over to you, Cheri. All yours.
Thanks, Claudia. I'm very excited to be here today to work with the Demand Gen team again, and also to present to all of you about something that I'm really passionate about, which is data. And I'm excited for this presentation in particular because I crafted it in a way that really makes it practical, and it's all thinking about there are 4 things that you can do. And we all like checklists, and we all like an easy way to go about things. So hopefully this will be a good tool for you as you move along in your journey to capture data in the right way. And more importantly, making sure that we start with the end in mind and know how we actually want to act on the data that we are capturing. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. And of course, the fact that it is first-party data is even more important, since that is liquid gold for marketers. So the 4 steps that we're going to be going over are, first, starting with an understanding of what the different data types are. We'll talk about what we actually want to be listening for. And once we define that, we're able to understand what sensors we need to put within our marketing programs to be listening for the data that we want to be capturing. And finally, we'll close off with this idea of how do we actually act on the data. So much can be put into capturing data or having fabulous reports, but making sure that you have actions for sales and marketing based on that data is really important. And I would actually go so far as to say is that it's not just the buying signals. There's so much that goes into beyond speaking to sales or raising your hand for a demo that's important that we're listening for, and that we can have different sales and marketing plays actually built around it. So those are the 4 steps that we'll be going over today. And like I mentioned, we're going to start by understanding really what different data types are. And this all gets back to the fact that not all data is actually created equal. It's not to say that some is better or worse than others, but what's important is that we understand that the story that different data points are telling us, and making sure that we have the right context for that information so that we can understand the power and the value we have of it. So up on screen, we have 3 things that you might be measuring in your marketing programs today. White paper downloads, someone showing up to a webinar, maybe that's a physical event, actually end up being booked with sales. All tell a different story. All tell one story, actually, when stitched together in the right way. But it's really important to understand that not all of those data points are actually created equal. And it really gets back to the fact that something looking at a white paper download is really a measurement of a tactic. It's a measurement of something that was done. Whereas someone showing up to an event that you're running is actually the illustration and a data point that speaks to a successful program that was put into market. It takes probably more than one touch, more than one action for someone to actually show up and attend an event that you're running. And finally, if we think about someone booking a meeting with you, that's a data point that is illustrative of a campaign, a series of programs that led to someone deciding that they wanted to speak with you. And it's really important that we have this context because, again, they all tell different points and they're important to measure together, but we need to make sure that we understand that they are different at the end of the day. And being able to build the story around what is most important comes out of this. So I've built out this slide to include some examples that you have here that take a different lens on how we can think about those data points that we're capturing in our marketing programs. And on that previous slide, you might say, I'm only looking at 1 or 2 of these. Maybe you do all 3. Maybe you already have this all underway. But this slide is important because it actually breaks down in a different way the different data categories that we have. And the first is this idea of activity metrics. And these are actually the count of internal actions that you are taking as a marketer. The number of webinars you're running, the number of emails you're sending, the number of pieces of content that you're developing for download within resources sections on your website. This is really an inward view of marketing and saying, here's what I have done. And this is important, especially as you look to build budget, build resources internally. Moving forward, and this actually gets to a lot of the metrics that were on the previous slide, is this idea of impact metrics. So this is where we're thinking about the results of the actions that we took. So how, in a way, audiences reacted, how prospects, how customers reacted to the marketing programs that we put into market. So this is where you see things like registration, attendance, length of attendance, whether that be a web session, a webinar, a virtual event, looking at things like the engagement actions that were taken within an event and the content that people actually download. Now, these are really well within our control as marketers to be able to capture, but oftentimes people will lean too heavily on the activity metric points because they can be easier to measure. And finally, the holy grail that we're all leaning towards is this idea of thinking about what the business impact of our marketing is. So this is looking at things like the pipeline that's generated out of our marketing programs, the opportunities, and if you live in an account-based world, the impact that your marketing is having on a set list of accounts. So again, much to the previous slide, thinking about the different categories that we have and knowing that each of these data classifications has a role in the data story that you are trying to create. But for the purposes of today's session, we're really going to be thinking about how we actually want to listen for the right signals. And like I mentioned earlier, there's so much talk about first-party data out there. We spent several years really focused on third-party intent signals, but with changes in the environment and changes in how we can help support sales, it's actually really important that we start to prioritize the signals that our buyers and our customers are giving directly on our properties, directly within our owned marketing programs that we have in market. So with that, and this idea of focusing on first-party data signals, I want to focus more on the impact metrics here. So this is making sure, much to the promise of this session, that we're setting up the sensors in the right way to be listening for the impact metrics, these idea of data points that actually show us audience behavior. And of course, this is going to focus a little bit more specifically on engagement during virtual events or webinars, but this can really be applied across marketing programs because this idea of how an audience is interacting with you is critical and should be infused within all of the programs that you're putting into market. And I say this because the signals that we're looking for really come down to helping us build out a better story and better support for our good old friend BANT, so budget, authority, need, and timeline. And this can be a helpful construct as we think about that data that we're capturing because there's so much context here. And I feel really strongly that the impact metrics that I was mentioning before, those data points, help to build an understanding really of the need that we're looking for here, especially if you are a marketer that either has multiple technologies or services you put into market, a product that has a high level of customization. Listening for signals that can help you better understand what the actual need for your product is can go a long way in helping to guide that buyer or customer in the right way to understand what you can offer to them. How important is it for us to be able to pass to sales a more qualified opportunity, or even at the persona level, just a more clarified view of what someone is most interested in? And I think that this is really important, especially if we think about how frustrated people can get when they feel like a company isn't listening to them. And there's some great research from Forrester that talks about why deals can get slowed down. And it's really interesting to look at what we have in our control. And a lot of that is about better listening. And I think that's important because we can listen. People are spending a lot of time with us, especially in the digital environment. So we can actually be listening for things in the right way. But in order to do that, we need to take a step back and make sure that we are actually setting up our marketing programs in a way that are listening for the right signals. So we think about that within the realm of this idea of sensors. So making sure that we're setting up the sensors throughout our marketing programs that are actually going to listen for those data points that we've already talked about. And I usually think about this from the perspective of every marketing tactic that we put into motion has 5 core elements to it. And I'll build this out here. Really this idea of the content or message that we're putting in front of someone, the idea of how we're going to reach those audiences. So for today's session, we're of course using a webinar for that delivery mechanism. But then thinking about how each opportunity that we have in front of someone offers the chance to engage them and provide to them calls to action. So how we keep someone's attention during an activity, but how we expect someone to act at the close of the activity as well. And it's really the results of the engagement and calls to action where we get down to the fact that these are the sensors that we need to be setting up within our marketing programs. And oftentimes marketers kind of stop at that delivery mechanism level. They think about what message we need to get across, and then they think about how I'm going to reach people, but then that's where they stop. And there needs to be a lot more due diligence put into this idea of how we keep someone's attention and what makes sense for them to do at the end of that time with us. That is so important. And that's really those buying signals that we're looking for. So I want to make this a little bit more real. So the next slide has, quite honestly, a lot of boxes on it, but it's really meant to be illustrative to say that as we develop tactics and programs that we put into market that are aligned to different stages of the buyer customer journey, that the engagement, the way we keep someone's attention during the session and how we want someone to act afterwards should look and feel really different based on the stage of the journey that we are trying to impact. So we'll use 2 examples on here that are on very different ends of the spectrum. And if we think about a webinar that we might do at the awareness stage of the buying journey, we might be able to think about the way we keep someone engaged during a session is to have great content, of course, but to also take questions. We can do a lot more than that, but really at its simplest level, that's important. And especially if you are a company that has a longer buying cycle, the call to action out of that event, especially if it's something that was really high level and based around thought leadership, might not be to speak to sales. A better call to action that you might want to drive audiences to is to subscribe to your content, or maybe it's to sign up or register for the next event that you're running, whether that be a virtual event or a physical event. So really understanding that at the end of something that is really high level and maybe not even focused on your product, the right call to action might not be speak to sales because they might not be ready to yet. But we don't want to give up on a call to action in that moment. We want to make sure that we're offering audiences the right way to keep engaging with us. Now, on the other end of the spectrum, if we take, for example, a way that we're putting a marketing program in place to help with product adoption, make sure that people are utilizing the full feature set within your product suite, which is a huge priority, especially for SaaS companies. Again, we could use a webinar to deliver that content to people. And the content that we could be sharing might be our product roadmap. Now, the way that we would engage people, sure, we could let people ask questions, but wouldn't it be even more powerful to offer our customers the opportunity to review in real time what they see and what they like about our product roadmap? Things like emoji reactions, thumbs up, thumbs down, voting, letting people prioritize what they found to be most exciting. It's a great way to keep people engaged. Also really powerful data for us to have. So if you're a marketer or sales or customer success, knowing which of the roadmap features that people are excited about for your accounts is incredibly important. That will allow you to maybe offer them the chance to be in the beta, or make sure that you are following up with them and letting them know as soon as those features are available. Really powerful for us to have. And maybe the call to action, again, because we're sharing something that is future facing with a product roadmap, the call to action doesn't have to be to speak to sales because they probably know their salesperson, their account manager, their customer success person. Maybe it's to get them more ingrained in the thought leadership, the content you have. So a certification course that is about your product or even about best practices in that industry could be a really powerful tool here. And also, we know people, when they think like us, they tend to buy from us. So this is a great way to further engage your customers. So that was a lot on this slide. I want to acknowledge there's a lot of content on here, but it was meant to be illustrative from the perspective of how we would actually act on things and set up programs that look and feel different based on the stage of the journey that we're looking for, and making sure that we set up those sensors in the way to listen for the right things. So now we've reached the fourth and final step that we have to think about how we're listening and acting on buying signals. So for this, here we are at the final point where we're actually thinking about how we act on that data that we've captured. So we've already gone through the different types of data, what we're listening for, how to set up those sensors that we talked about within our marketing programs. Now we're going to say, how do you actually act on that data that we're receiving that is much more customized and tailored than, thank you for showing, thank you for downloading our white paper. And I like to use polling as the way to illustrate how to think about acting on data, because it provides very clear paths for behavior. So that's the example I'm using. We can do it in a lot of different ways, of course. But if we think about a polling question that we might ask someone, and this could be done through a virtual event or an in-person event. If you ask someone at the end of content that's being shared, do you want to speak to sales, yes or no? If someone says yes, should be very excited to follow up on that. But if someone says no, also important for us to think about what that means. Other behavior from that might show us that they're still interested, but they didn't want to talk to sales today. Maybe they're busy, maybe things going on. Maybe this isn't their top priority, but it will be in 3 months. So not to mean that someone says no forever, just no for now. And to take this in a little bit more nuanced direction, I think about it from the perspective of how we can use polling and questioning someone in a way that provides a lot more new information about that person, that company, and the journey that they're on. One thing I've learned in my career is when you share data to someone, they like to talk to it. They like to tell you if they're doing good, related to it, better, worse. And here I would say, if we present someone and we ask, are you industry average, better, low, it provides good insight for sales to act on afterwards. So if someone says that they're doing the same as industry average, this is where we could follow up with them about advanced capabilities or a different product line that might be important to them. If someone's doing better than average, this is where we might want to invite to speak at an upcoming event. And finally, if someone's worse, we can treat them with a lot more empathy and respect, helps them think about how to alleviate their challenges. So with that, I've shared with you my 4 tips for thinking about how to listen and act on buying signals. So I appreciate everyone's time today, and I know we have some time for some questions.
Thank you, Cheri, for that awesome presentation and those great insights. You did spark some pretty good questions. I think we got a couple. But before I get to those, I just want to remind everyone once again to please share your thoughts and feedback before logging off today. You could click that survey icon at any time, or the survey will launch automatically when the session ends. And then just a quick heads up, we're going to cover these questions now, but if we don't get to your question live, do not worry. We will definitely follow up via email or chat. So, all right, let's get to those questions. All right, first one, how do I prioritize the data I want and or need to capture?
I like that they're already thinking about prioritization, to be honest, Claudia, because I think usually it starts there. People get intimidated by so much that they could listen for. I would start by thinking about one program that you're going to be running and actually less about the specific data. So say give yourself some runtime. So say that you are doing an event at September or a marketing program that launches in September, and start there and say, all right, this is what I'm putting into market. I'm only going to focus on this one program that I'm running, and then set the data up from there. I wouldn't try to make a wholesale change to listening before you do it in a small area. And then that's where I would say, think about, based on the stage of the journey that program is targeting, what are the right things to listen for? So are we listening to understand more about their propensity to buy? Or do we want to understand more about which of the products are most important? Or maybe we want to think more about how quickly someone could close. I would decide on one of those and make sure that you set up the content aligned to that, and make sure that you just start small with that one program, try it out, get a few SDRs on your team to do that, and you should be good to go.
Awesome. Sounds great. All right. I think we have time for one more question. So let's do this one because I really like it. What is the most overlooked metric?
Ooh, that's a good one. I would say it's usually the impact metric. I think most people understand a count of their actions, and a lot of people like to measure that. They should. It's good, like job security, to say I do a lot of things. And then people try to leap automatically from what they do to the business impact. And they forget about the steps in the middle where, our buyers and our customers need to interact with us. And they forget about the meat in the middle, I would say. So I think that's usually the thing that's most overlooked.
Awesome. Very interesting. All right. I'm going to cap the Q&A at this because that's really all the time we have. But like I said, if we didn't get to your question live, do not worry. We will definitely be following up with answers. All right. Well, that's a wrap on another BII session. Thank you again to Cheri for her awesome presentation. And thank you to all of our attendees for taking the time to join us today. We've got plenty more where this came from. So join us for our next session. It's called Personalized Like a Pro Across Your Entire Buyer Journey. It's kicking off at 2 p.m. Eastern today. So we hope to see you there. Thanks again, and take care, everyone.